What is up? Welcome to a new volume of Respawn. I am Colby.
And I'm Derek.
Yes, and we're very excited for this volume. Even more so for the past few. We've had a ton of fun doing the past couple volumes, but this one has kind of been the one I'm waiting for, because not only do you get Grant Morrison, not only do you get Greg Capullo, I say two of my favorites, two of literally my top two favorites. You also get, to me, where you break out, start breaking that mold of, hey, this is what everyone knows about Spawn, and start going into, hey, here's some like the actual cool Spawn stuff.
True. Also, I think we're going to be in agreement in this. You see some of the very best we've seen so far from Spawn, and quite possibly the single worst issue we've seen so far from Spawn.
Yeah, it's a weird mix. I will say, literally 90% of this book is some like pitch perfect, just fun 90s Spawn, and then there's one, and we'll get to it, but yeah, there's one issue that anyone listening can probably figure out, because it's one of the few odd ones of the bunch, because you start off with the continuation.
Yeah, you start off in a weird goddamn place, because we got to finish up that two-parter that just unceremoniously cut off at the end of Origins Volume 2.
Yeah, which I will say, that's my one complaint with these volumes, because these volumes are put together pretty well. They have not a ton of extras, but a little bit of extras and some cool little things, but the ending on a cliffhanger, I know a lot of people do it, like forcing you, well, not forcing, but wanting you to buy the next volume. This 100% should have started on issue 16. It's the start of Morrison Capullo. You have new stuff. You have new characters introduced, a new story. Instead, we do start on the part 2 of the medieval Spawn and his love story, which, in fairness, I really actually dig this little mini-story. I like Violator, kind of just bending the truth, lying to these kids, trying to impress them, but also you get a cool medieval Spawn story, and you also get some really touching moments in that issue, but yeah, it's kind of bizarre. Well, I guess we're already talking about issue 15, so we'll jump into it. Yeah, issue 15. I will say, the one thing I don't love that it starts with traditional old-school McFarlane, the super long recap.
Oh, yeah, the block of text on the very first page. I remember the first time I read Spawn Origins Volume 3, I audibly sighed and just put the volume down for a bit, because I couldn't do it. I just couldn't wade my way into these words. Just to do the overall impression before we get to the nitty-gritties, I will say that I like this issue a lot more than the previous issue. It actually ends a lot stronger than it began, I felt. Also, something we're going to get to later this volume, I really love that pretty much all the demons talk kind of like Violator. They're all kind of snappy. They all kind of talk too much. They all have little... They like to pump themselves up and talk about how great they are. So the fact that it's not just Violator who talks just way too goddamn much is actually kind of a relief. It actually feels like an attempt at characterization. Yeah. That everybody does that.
No, I agree, and this is going to be an interesting volume where we'll talk about, because honestly, a lot of these issues, they don't necessarily have a lot going, like not a ton happens in every issue, but every issue, what does happen feels important and is very detailed, including this one, because the majority of this issue is the medieval fight with Violator from before, and you have just some cool fight scenes. I do like the whole thing about Violator breathing fire, but the medieval Spawn escaping by basically taking his armor off.
Yeah, letting the fire hit his armor, but being actually basically removing the symbiote and fighting him hand to hand. I will say a major complaint of mine about McFarlane is actually pretty absent this issue. For the most part, we actually get to see this fight scene. Yeah. There's actually a ton of cool action. A lot of it done in some, easily resellable splash pages where he would want to do so. Some of it, a lot more narration from Violator than I think is totally necessary, but the actual fights the actual fight scene itself is pretty spectacular. The one kind of callback to, I think, more traditional McFarlane, something happens off screen and we get to see the results, is there is a decapitation, but it's after quite a bit of really good action, so it feels like a proper denouement instead of perhaps McFarlane maybe taking a needed shortcut.
And one thing I appreciate about this, one of the one of the times that the literary influence of things like Romeo and Juliet are very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually enjoy it. Like, I actually kind of, even though it's a bit on the nose, how it is pulled off of essentially Medieval Spawn's major, his version of Wanda, if you will, is tied up. She can't escape, and what horrifies her the most isn't this fight between Spawn and the Demon Goddess. When this Medieval Spawn does come out of the armor, and she sees how just mutilated, tore up he is that completely horrified to the point where she runs away from him after he wins.
Yeah, and there's actually some genuinely, like, McFarlane, as a writer, he's melodramatic because I think a lot of novice writers are, but he really does, he pulls some really good heartstring dialogue from Medieval Spawn.
Yeah.
I swear I meant you no harm. Don't do this to me. I beg you. That's not bad, and the emotion is sold in the words and on the page with the pictures. It's a really good combination. Some of McFarlane's best work as a writer, honestly, the way he overwrites so much of this issue.
Yeah.
To have Medieval Spawn just quietly responding to her screams is it's a good contrast. I like it a lot.
Well, honestly, I'm pretty sure on purpose, knowing who did it, but it has a mirror reflection. Skipping a little ahead, but we won't go in full detail yet. But at the end of issue 18, with how Al Simmons does the stuff with Wanda outside the window, it has a nice little reflection of that moment, but in a more positive light.
That's true.
And I think overall, this issue, just from the talking to kids, from Violator still kind of impressing Malbolgia by losing the fight in a very Violator type of fashion. Yeah, overall, like you said, I think it's better than the first part. I think the art is killer. The fight, this entire volume is full of great fights, but this is so far either the best or second best McFarlane drawn fight we've seen.
I was going to say, as far as fights McFarlane has done, I feel like this is probably his best work. And, when I first read this volume, I was a little eye-rolly at the idea of the Violator being the influence for the first dragon, because dragons aren't necessarily medieval. They actually go back much, much further than medieval times. But, whatever. I totally can buy this if you need to headcanon it in such a way. This is, again, Violator just beefing up his own story for the kids, as opposed to something that is actually taking place. Maybe the first medieval dragon, sure, but I don't know. It's a goofy detail, but it's fun. I don't hate it.
And I will say that's one thing I liked. The only part of the opening, like super recap I liked, was the line about the only thing getting more tore up than the victims is the truth.
Yeah, it's a clever little line. Unfortunately, there's still 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages of story to go.
Yeah.
And there's no real story here. Spawn gets beat up for sleeping outside of apparently the back of a restaurant, or something. Decides to beat the crap out of the guy that's beating him up. Declares the alley Spawn territory, and then we find out some terrible things are happening for Terry.
Yeah.
Which, at least that part, story-wise, I don't understand why. Did McFarlane just run out of ideas? Did he just not want to continue make an entire issue a fight scene? But then this is another fight scene.
Yeah.
Did he want to bring his own character into the? It's such a weird. Because it feels like it ends on a really solid point when which basically sets up the Violator miniseries.
Yeah.
But then you got another 5 pages of nothing before you get to the plot point about Terry. It's weirdly paced. It
is, and I think on one hand I kind of like seeing Spawn more protective, and you kind of start in this entire volume you see more and more of him getting protective of the alley and the people there. But you are right, this kind of comes from literally nowhere. It just cuts to that, and there's not a huge point. And the stuff with, like you said, the stuff with Terry and Wanda does move it forward, but it also, it doesn't necessarily feel like it has to. It doesn't feel like it feels like there are 3 distinctive story beats that are not connected in this entire volume.
Exactly. It really feels like McFarlane got done with the Violator story and is like, man, this kicks ass. Wait, 15 pages? Shit.
Yeah.
And then just, had to go back and throw in some other stuff. And what's funny is, the fight between Spawn and the Musclehead, again, it's not bad. It's a lot more detailed than we see of a lot of Spawn fights, at least in the first couple of pages. We definitely descend to the sound effects and reaction shots. And there's a nice little splash page of Naked Spawn,
yes,
which is kind of reflective of Naked Medieval Spawn. I don't know, maybe he was trying to draw a parallel. It's definitely not working.
No, it's really, and again, like I said, it's not necessarily bad, but it does just feel different than everything else we had just gotten.
Agreed.
I don't think it definitely doesn't hurt things. It does add, at least to me, it adds a little bit of more of a sense of his loyalty to the alley, to the overall world, but it also does just feel like, oh, it almost feels like an after credit scene.
Yeah. And you're right. It definitely adds to Al's taking ownership of the alley, which, again, as someone who's known about Spawn for, half my life, Al Simmons' Spawn in the New York alley is, it's such a part of his character that it's kind of easy to forget that those things need to develop. So that's actually a really good point. I don't think it's handled as cleanly as one would have hoped.
I agree. I think it's not. When I talk about this issue, that is a part of it that I don't really think of. It's not that I necessarily forget it, but it's just not the main focus, and also doesn't. It's not like it builds up to anything outside of just an overall feeling.
Right. Exactly.
Overall really solid. A pretty solid issue. Not a bad one. Had this been the previous volumes, this may have been one of the best in the volume, but we've got.
Yeah, because we were not thrilled with the McFarlane heavy issues of Volume 2. They ran the gamut of goofy but fun to outright terrible. I think if you'd capped off Volume 2 with this issue, we would have been like, well, at least it ended strong.
Yeah, and where we're going to now, though, starts so strong because now, issue 16, we get. Again, Grant Morrison, and we get the debut of Greg Capullo for Spawn.
Well, we've got to acknowledge why that's the case, though. Basically, what happened was McFarlane got involved with Spawn Batman, and the reason Spawn Batman existed was because, as terrible as the issue was, Frank Miller had an absolutely wonderful time doing Spawn number 11. So they decided to work together on a crossover volume with the two characters, which meant that McFarlane could not work on his main title, so he brought in relative newcomer, I believe, Greg Capullo, and up-and-coming DC badass Grant Morrison for 3 issues. The story is called Reflections, and surprise, surprise, the blah blah comics, blah blah curse words guys fucking love these issues.
Yeah. Oh, and he had even more story with kind of Morrison goes more so we can dive into it, where when they first announced the slates of writers that were going to guest write, you had Neil Gaiman, you had Frank Miller, you had Alan Moore, but one of the names that was included in a lot of those lists for early magazines was Grant Morrison, even though there was no talks at that time between Grant Morrison and McFarlane, and that basically led to opening the conversation later on with McFarlane saying, well, a lot of people are reacting positively to these magazine articles saying you're going to write for Spawn. Would you like to write for Spawn?
I did not know that, but that's wonderful. I think that's really fantastic.
Yeah, I think Morrison, I've heard a few interviews where he touches on it, and I think it's briefly touched on in either the documentary that was made or Super Gods, one of the two. I know those two kind of get intertwined.
I've read Super Gods. I haven't seen the documentary, so it's probably the documentary. Also, I need to see the documentary.
That's really good. But, it's just one of those things where he's like, hey, people want you to write it. Do you want to write it? And he said, at this point, Capullo had done some work, he had done some stuff at Marvel, he had done a few other things, but nothing that was earth-shattering.
This was post his X-Men stuff, right?
Yes.
When he was doing, I think it was X-Force, maybe X-Factor. Maybe X-Men. He did work for the Executioner song, is what I'm trying to say, which is a volume I still want to have him autograph at some point. Oh, yeah. That is absolutely something that's going to happen.
Because this was not 94, so you have you have his career. It's kind of the point where it starts kicking off. But I think it's funny because reading this issue, you see a lot of early things that he would change big time later in his career. And you can definitely see kind of how he's evolved from this point. But at the same time, there's still some great art in this issue.
There is also, I can see why in his initial, when he first came on the book, people were calling him a McFarlane clone or very much of a studio, because he works very hard to capture the tone of what McFarlane has established so far in the book. To be fair, though, he is the first person to draw Spawn. We've had other writers on Spawn. This is the first time we've had a different artist, so trying to keep a consistent tone and look is absolutely understandable. And yeah, like you said, there are some really tremendous things and hints of where Capullo is going to go. Now, story-wise, I want to point a little something out. It didn't really hit me until this read-through. We've only really seen Jason win once, maybe twice, before this arc. Again, knowing who Spawn is, having seen the movie, having watched the animated series, I know that Jason Wynn is a terrifically important character for Spawn, and at least to start with, one of the major bad guys of Spawn. He's the guy that had Al Simmons killed. But to this point, he's threatened Terry, and I think he's actually shown up on panel physically once, and now he gets his own upgrade. Yeah. And it never hit me before how quickly he goes just from Wynn to the Redeemer.
Well,
or Anti-Spawn.
Anti-Spawn turns into Redeemer. Another one of my favorite characters in comics. So
I'm shocked.
Yeah, it starts off. This issue starts really strong, where it starts off with a very Morrison idea, where you have essentially an A-bomb opening up a dimension to hell, and the government,
literally a hell on Earth. Yeah,
the government using its advantage and finding out about psychoplasm, this material that Spawn's made out of, all these other people are made out of, all these other things and demons are made out of, that can basically turn into anything and be this unlimited power source. He just has, the deal he makes is he has to help Malbolgia make his army, and that's why it's revealed one reason why he had Al Simmons killed.
Absolutely. And it's also, you say it's a very Morrison idea. It's a very 90s Morrison idea, because it feels very much of the grim and gritty era. It feels very much of its time, while also being ahead of its time for its time. Like, reading it now 30 years later, you're like, yeah, I can definitely see that. In the 90s, it feels both 90s and being in the 90s, something that people would have been like, whoa, mind blown.
Well, it's very, Doom Eternal just came out. It's very like Doom and Mars.
Yes, yeah.
It's very that, so that even the point that might have been a little influence. And you also get one of my favorite points in early Spawn. You get, and one of the things that the animated series excelled at, you get the scene of Al Simmons going to his grave and finding out he is not in his body.
Yes, exactly. And okay. For one, I just major props and kudos to Greg Capullo. There's a confrontation between Spawn and some, let's call them what they are, assholes in the alley who are threatened to burn a bum. And that fight, again, that action scene, that little bit of a fight scene is terrific. Yeah. Just really, it's percussive. It moves forward. It's very strongly paced. It's very clear and easy to read. He does take advantage of the necessary splash pages to make Spawn look badass. Just everything about it is just rock solid. And this is where I think Capullo really starts to shine in this issue. Sure, the fight with the demons and the army guys up front was pretty solid, but man, I was just, again, reading, I hate to keep saying this, but reading this the second time through, knowing who the artist was this time and really focusing on that. Yeah. It's a tremendous piece of work.
It is, and it's so cool for me because, again, I can't preface enough how much I love Capullo's art and how much of, for me personally, how he's had a huge influence. To the point where off of the world of Respawn. Right now, he's doing these things where you can get stuff signed, and I was literally up all night trying to pick a comic for him to sign and remark because I'm so excited to send it off.
Yeah.
So when I say I'm a huge fan, I also waited like 3 hours in line with the media pass, but that's a different story, to meet him at a con a few years ago.
And you got my Batman #1 signed by him for me, since I'd already had it signed by Capullo, by Snyder, because you are a sweet, sweet dude. One more thing I also want to touch on before we get to Spawn in his grave, because I feel like I want to spend a little bit of time on that. The Jason Wynn taking down ninjas before being transported by angels. Yes. This is the kingpinest goddamn scene. This is just a straight up nod to Frank Miller's Kingpin work in Daredevil.
So,
down to Jason Wynn kind of having a gut, but still being just an absolute badass.
I have a theory about this issue. This was, so Alan Moore had written for Spawn a little bit earlier, and this was very much in the time frame of Morrison and Moore not loving each other.
Right.
Is this kind of Morrison's anatomy lesson? Because I only say that because this is like the reveal of Spawn, of who Spawn is very anatomy lesson-esque.
Man, I had not thought of that at all. But that's an interesting thought. I don't know if it feels like if it was the anatomy lesson, we would have spent more time with Spawn and the discovery and the ramifications of it.
Yeah.
But as far as just like, a nod or perhaps an homage, even a sarcastic homage, I can definitely see that happening.
Well, and also, I mean, you essentially, for those who, again, it's a very, now getting close to almost a 30-year-old comic, the big reveal being that Al Simmons, his soul is still him, but his body is in the grave. They buried his body.
Yeah, which means that not just his costume is the cycloplasm we've introduced at the beginning of the issue, so is he. Which explains, and they later talk about how it explains why he can change his form, though not why he can't change his form to that of actually Al Simmons, at least not right now.
Yeah.
And like you said, this is a well done scene. The animated series fucking slaughters this scene. Makes it tremendously memorable. Man, I remember being both deeply impressed and deeply creeped the fuck out by this moment in the animated series.
The animated series, I think it's kind of cool that is starting to gain steam again, because Spawn animated series is, in the 90s, you literally had several incredibly and amazing animated series based on comics, but Spawn animated series is one that I think did the rare thing of being completely honest and faithful to its source material, but also making certain things even better. And really, because whereas we both love and adore X-Men animated series or Batman animated series, but both those had the limitations of they were ultimately made for kids, so they couldn't do certain things, and sometimes that led to bettering things.
Also they were episodic.
Yeah.
Whereas Spawn,
they
had an overarching series storyline.
They went, and up until that point, I think what people forget, up until that point, you basically just had the people who watched Japanese anime of the early 90s were the only people who were really... I think the idea of formulaic storytelling, but storytelling that was told over multiple episodes, was something that we take for granted now. But if you look back at 80s and 90s, how few of shows, especially cartoons or anime series, did that in America was staggering low.
Well, the first show that really brought it to attention for this genre was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yeah. But then, or at least for network or cable television, because, Spawn was on HBO.
Yeah.
But, that's one of the reasons that, I don't know where I was going with that sentence. Billy Kincaid being the overarching villain of season 1, I think is incredibly well handled and very, very, very well staged.
Yeah.
As opposed to the comic where, like I said, he initially felt like it was a done in one issue, and then Alan Moore did something extra with him, and then apparently he shows up after 300. So,
he pops. Billy Kincaid pops up in and out a few times throughout the series, but it's always treated like a big deal. He's always kind of a rare boogeyman.
That's excellent. I'm weirdly kind of excited to see him when he shows up next.
Yeah. Man, it may be a minute, but he does come back.
Yeah, I imagine. So just to finish out issue 16, we get 2 pages of Jason Wynn being transformed by the Angels, and then a big old splash page of Anti-Spawn, a.k.a. eventually the Redeemer. I'm kind of surprised that they went with a crouched pose for him, because I feel like you do not get to see enough of his costume. But other than that, it's a pretty crackerjack ending. Yeah,
and one thing I love that Spawn has always done is it's always been very, very, very faithful to like the old biblical sense of angels being like kind of monstrous and really not understanding the human condition whatsoever. So the fact these angels,
they're not humans.
These angels kidnapping someone, putting them through extreme torture and not caring or understanding even what they're going through, like not understanding the idea of pain. And in this series, like Jason Wynn, like yelling as he's being transformed, literally being molded with fire to be this angelic version and literal anti-Spawn. It's a very effective scene, and it goes into issue 17 very well, where you get issue 17. Issue 17. You go and you get a little bit more detail about kind of psychoplasm and stuff going on. You get more stuff with the Grave, which kind of carries over between both of them.
Yeah.
But with the anti-Spawn landing, you get an incredible fight between the two.
You do, and before we get to the fight with the anti-Spawn, I have to point out one very specific thing, and again, it's something I just noticed this time. So, when the Angels send the anti-Spawn to Earth, that panel is incredibly reminiscent of Ennis and, oh God, why am I blanking on his name? He's one of my favorite artists. Steve Dillon's Preacher. Yeah. That's very reminiscent of something that happens in the first issue of Preacher. And I can't help but think, because Ennis and Morrison are actually really good friends, that Ennis may have been like, maybe crib a little bit of this. Maybe, let's kind of have some synchronicity here between what was happening here and what's happening with the spawn of a demon and an angel here. Maybe not. Maybe I'm full of shit. But I just... It feels incredibly similar in a way that I think is incredibly delightful.
Didn't this come out before the first issue of Preacher?
That's what I'm saying, yes.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I thought you were saying the reverse. I was like...
No. I'm thinking that Ennis and Dillon may have been like, hey, that looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
Grant and Greg did something really, really cool there. I wonder if we can kind of, make that look... play with that idea. So
you're not wrong, because I forgot this was relatively soon too, because this is 94. That's 95.
Yeah.
So
it would have been really fresh in both of their minds. And like I said, Grant Morrison and Garth Ennis are pretty good pals. So I would not at all be surprised if it was kind of an homage to something that Morrison had done. That Capullo did. I don't know. It struck me as that's beautiful, and I feel like I've seen that before, but later.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Like, this is... It's one of those things where, because I'm looking at it now, like, you're right. It is similar in a way I never noticed.
Yeah. Like I said, it hit me just now, but the Angels at the controls, followed by the meteoric fire of this creature being shot down from space to Earth. Also, go to the next page. Spawn still ranting after Malbosia. We kind of skipped over the Spawn Malbosia conversation. It's a little wordy. It feels very McFarlane, even though it's Morrison. But there's a great little line here. Don't know what the hell that was, but my skin's crawling with static. There's something in there. That is just a really well-turned bit of phrase. And then you turn the page and you get the anti-Spawn reveal, and I goddamn motherfucking love the anti-Spawn's belt. That's hilarious to me.
Well, it's very funny because you do have this angelic creature that is, literally being made just to stop Spawn, and as much as it is, because Redeemer's costume will show when he becomes Redeemer, his outfit changes quite a bit, and especially its initial image, you have a very literally, in every sense of the word, anti-Spawn.
Yeah, it's literally the Spawn costume, but flipped for heaven. But also, he's wearing a belt with the Spawn symbol with a Ghostbusters no sign drawn over it. And that is the most hilarious goddamn thing in the world to me.
You also, really quick, one of my favorite things in this, you get the Angels, and last issue in this, you're kind of talking about the fact that one reason that spurred this is he defeated Angela, and we don't really know where Angela is at this point.
Right.
We don't know much about it, but you see a little bit of Gabriel in the last issue being just bombarded by them and her agreeing to, letting them do their plan and going to where the Angels literally have a satellite space station around Earth. And I always kind of dug, again, they all happened around the same time, so it could have been influenced or it could have been something else, but very Doom influence of this technology and religious stuff, iconography coming together. You get some really cool stuff. My favorite part in this fight scene, though, between Spawn and Anti-Spawn, you get a cool moment of, so far we have seen 17 issues of Spawn be able to easily beat people, and this one he can't, but also he teleports away and is immediately followed.
Yeah, Before we get to that, though, I have to say, for a non-McFarlane issue, McFarlane neither wrote nor drew this issue. We get the most McFarlane-esque goddamn thing to ever happen in a Spawn comic, in that we get the introduction of the big badass bad guy, Hell Spawn. I've come for you. Turn the page, and there's C-SPAN or CNN and the other guy talking heads, and 2 pages of tension-breaking Terry and Wanda conversation before we cut back. And again, that is the most hilarious goddamn thing to me, that even without McFarlane on the book, you have to undercut the tension of a fight scene by throwing in some goddamn exposition.
It goes back to, it's a very, very melodramatic, but also a very, like, I've already said it once, but like anime type of thing to do, to lead up to this big fight and then immediately cut away and try to rebuild tension for the fight again, and then go back to the fight within, like, you know, a 3-page, 3-minute segment.
Right. That's fair. Also, like, you're not wrong. Spawn gets his ass kicked. My favorite panel of this comic is probably the one where Spawn crashes into the faux church of Simmonsville, and his face is just punctured with glass.
Oh, we haven't even talked about Simmonsville being a reflection of Simmons.
Right, yeah. It's the Hell on Earth psychoplasm that we were introduced to last issue is literally made up of things from Al Simmons' childhood or life.
Yeah,
from his life.
When he's crashing through the church, it's the church that him and Wanda got married in.
Yeah.
So it has,
and then it's also infected with demons from hell, because this is, again, a hellscape, which the anti-Spawn burns with heaven fire, and it's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, Spawn realizes he has no recourse here, and does the thing he hates to do the most. He teleports back to the alley, which is supposed to be his place of safety, and is, like you said, immediately tracked and followed. As soon as he gets there, Anti-Spawn steps out of his own teleportation portal and blasts the shit out of him.
Yeah.
His costume starts melting. He's hit so hard.
Yeah, and you have, like, him talking about how, you know, his costume can't handle it. He can't do it. You in a couple pages you get the iconic thing of I was gonna say Respawn or Redeemer, but Anti-Spawn, like, making his flames into the flame sword. You get some just really cool iconic images. You have this fight scene that is going on for several pages, and it is essentially a squash match between Anti-Spawn and Spawn, and him just completely, you know, decimating him in a lot of ways. He's taking, literal cutting pieces of his costume. There's pieces of him flying. Like you mentioned, there's things of shards of glass. He's all poked up. He's scarred up. He's beat up.
He's been blasted through the chest in ways very similar to what the Violator did back in issue like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
But this one you don't feel like he's going to get up and walk away from. And then, again, we have a final splash page cliffhanger, and it's probably the most effective cliffhanger in the 17 issues of Spawn we've read so far.
Yeah. No, you have a cliffhanger that makes you go like, oh my god, how is he going to overcome this?
Yeah. Then I just got to say, issue 18 has a really great cover. It harkens back to what we found out on issue 16, but still, great cover.
And 18, you begin with a little bit of story of some of the residents of the alley, and they're talking about war and talking about specifically one person who he, in Vietnam, kind of abandoned his troop a little bit and kind of let someone really let a few people die and get extremely injured and tore up, and there's some great descriptors for what happens to them.
Yeah, and it also, again, it plays with that idea of, you know, Spawn is a part of the alley now.
Yeah.
You don't leave your buddies behind. And how does Spawn get out of it? Well, one of the alley mates reams Anti-Spawn upside the head with a metal bar, and distracts him long enough for Spawn to get his wind back. It's actually really great and really sweet, and I like it a lot, especially considering how surprisingly well, McFarlane and, you know, others at this point have developed Spawn's relationship with the alley mates.
Yeah, I agree. And like the whole thing of like you got to watch your buddies back, you got to be there for him, and him really, really hammering home like, you know, we're not going to be here, and distracting Redeemer enough for Spawn to kind of get a cheap shot, punch in, and kind of get him down and really attack him. And also, one of the coolest scenes, another cool scene that I love of how Spawn ultimately defeats Redeemer, punching him through the face, but instead of dying, you have this elemental flame just pouring out of his face.
Well, first he blasts him in the head, like grabs both sides of his head, blasts him with his own Hellspawn power, and then punches him directly through the head in a much more dynamic shot of the Gaze into the Fist of Dread, Dread versus the Dark Judges scene. That again, Morrison would be eminently familiar with. But yeah, I love that he's not bleeding; he's literally leaking heaven fire from his head.
It's a really cool scene. You get a flash, and he's transported back to the Angels, and it has one of my favorite lines. Because again, it's interesting how Morrison can kind of mimic other people's style while still having his own. Because it has one of the most McFarlane lines by one of my favorite, even though it's not McFarlane, and it's the guy going, "I'll be damned." And so I go, "Wouldn't recommend it."
Yeah, that's a great bit. But also has some of my least favorite dialogue from Morrison in here. The punching him through the head and saying, "Have a nice day," that's just cheesy. But the "I'll kill you, tell me about it," not bad. "I'll be damned, wouldn't recommend it" is a great line.
Yeah. It's a cool first introduction of this character and a first major fight. You get all of that going on. And I did like, then you have him going through this town, Simmonsville, and you also get him like running into one of the military directors that he used to work for. You have and killing him,
which that actually really caught me off guard. But before we talk about him, I do want to ask real quick: is there anything you can tell me without spoiling anything about not Cagliostro here?
No, so that's what I was trying to remember because I could not remember. And this is the ultimate problem. I forgot about that. I'm glad you mentioned that. With going back and rereading this, is so much Don't Run Forever where I have a vague memory, but not really. And the only thing I remember might be a spoiler, so I'll hold on to it. But
okay, but he does come back. He's not just a weird one-off. This isn't Cog, and then Cog comes back, and they never mention this guy again.
If I remember, he does. But some of the pre 50 stuff sometimes can kind of get blendy sometimes.
That's absolutely fair, dude. I just because I didn't remember this guy either, and it seems so weird that it's not Cog, especially considering our theory that initially I think Cog was supposed to be a representation of God.
Let's tie back with the loose mentioning of Angela and with Cog, and also this being written by Morrison. You have so many. You have three great comic minds all involved with this, and I can't tell if it's one of those things where Morrison didn't want to use Gaiman's characters, or McFarlane didn't want Morrison to use Gaiman's characters, or McFarlane didn't want Gaiman's characters to be used. But it is weird how you get allusions and mentions of both Cog and Angela, but you never really have them in these three issues.
Especially having two issues of straight-up medieval Spawn, who technically Gaiman does also have at least a partial creator claim to.
Yes,
which was part of the argument, which was part of the later controversy.
Yeah, and so I don't know, because I'm with you on that. That's odd. One thing I do love, I'm with you though about him shooting him. He
shoots a dude straight in the head, and that I found shocking, just because I feel like we haven't seen that level of premeditated violence before. It's always been Spawn reacting to a threat. This wasn't reacting to a threat. This was him shooting a guy in cold blood. A bad guy, sure. The guy in charge of Simmonsville, sure. But still, it feels out of character for Spawn to not react to be so proactive in murder.
The only way I can see where they're coming from writing it was because the first thing he mentioned is you work with Jason Wynn, and at this point he already knows that there's a lot of connections going on between how he ended up dying and what's going on with Terry and Wanda and Wynn. So I think it's supposed to be a trigger.
But he just scarred Chapel.
Yeah.
He shoots this dude in the face.
Yeah, but Chapel was kind of his friend, I guess.
Well, Chapel was what I feel like it is that Chapel was somebody else's character.
I mean, that's definitely part of it too.
I kind of hate that's what it feels like.
Yeah, well,
it's a little disappointing, I guess.
That's a legitimate part of it for sure. Yeah, no, you get that, but after that, you get a really cool little thing of him literally, because once he's like, I am Al Simmons, but Al Simmons is also buried. So him literally burning down his past.
Right. But also saving one specific memory, but not even for himself. He saves it for Wanda, and literally, this feels like the most Morrison line for some reason. Yeah. I cannot tell you why, but it feels like the most Morrison line of these three issues. Wanda, I saved it for you.
Yeah, well, he gives Wanda at least this fleeting moment of this memory. She remembers it, kind of almost immediately forgets it, and you have this really great image of a sad Spawn outside the window just saying, "I love you."
Yeah.
And it's that's, again, very effective art, effective line. effective melodrama. It's like
I was gonna say it's that McFarlane melodrama handled extremely well by someone who's not McFarlane, and it's an incredibly strong moment for sure.
Yeah, these 16, 17, 18 for early Spawn is some of my favorite issues. That's one reason I was really looking forward to this volume, because it's just some stuff I adore and some stuff that's really fun, and we get more fun stuff pretty soon too. It's not like there's a huge wait for issues I love again, but these issues, because of Grant Morrison, because of Greg Capullo, there's also that element of wow, it's just really cool to see Grant Morrison. Also, Grant Morrison, one of the few writers that got a guest writing spot with 3 whole issues. He got a whole arc.
Yeah, he got a whole arc to himself. I know we usually save this for the end of the show, but I'm just going to say right now, not only is issue 17 my favorite issue of this volume, I think issue 17 is my favorite issue of Spawn we have read up to this point.
I think that's fair. I mean, these 3, even for me, like 9 might have it beat, but it's very close. Like 9 and 17. When it comes to early pre-50 Spawn, like 9, 16, 17, 18, and like 29 and 30 sometimes, and 32 are all like kind of hold a very special place for me. And these
23 holds an incredibly special place for me. I've mentioned it a little bit on the show. We're going to talk about it next month for sure.
It's there's a few, but I just love that we're getting into these moments that are what you expect from Spawn, but also what a lot of people don't know off the top of their head. And this Morrison stuff is great. And what's weird in this volume, we go directly from some of the best Spawn in the early volumes, and possibly the best guest writer Spawn, I don't know about ever, but maybe, definitely top 3.
Well, I mean, again, you got to look at who's talking about this book. For those who are only tuning in for Respawn, we have our regular podcast, Blah Blah Comics, Blah Blah Curse Words. We are kind of known for being incredibly huge Grant Morrison stans. We have a deep and abiding adoration for Grant Morrison's work on the whole. So, I mean, it's totally fair to take our criticism of those particular issues with at least some grain of salt. It's absolutely fair.
Completely fair. But I also think if you look at it, these first few issues, the fact that the series has Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Frank Miller, and Grant Morrison all within 10 issues of each other is kind of insane.
Yeah, for sure. It didn't seem so when I was 14 because I didn't recognize those names for what they are. But looking back on it as an old man, it's definitely a holy shit, how did he pull that off moment.
And also, I love Frank Miller. Who would have guessed Frank Miller by far at the bottom of that
the worst. Yeah.
Like I love, in fairness, all of them are, we talk about like my top 20 favorite writers, they're all in my top 20, if not my top 10. So it's, you're picking at straws, but I will say both Morrison and Gaiman had issues that are, to this day, some of my all-time favorite comic issues, period, and Moore having a brilliant issue, and Miller having one
which completely rehabilitated a one-off character that seemed wasted at the time.
True. And also, we should mention, we might cover if you guys are interested in us covering the Violator miniseries, or a lot of the miniseries, like the 4-issue, 8-issue ones, let us know, like leave a comment if you would like that, because we've kind of gone back and forth on if we will or not.
Right.
But
we're definitely going to... Okay, I'm just going to spill the beans here.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, we haven't decided exactly how yet, we are absolutely going to talk about Spawn Batman in a special episode. But the Violated miniseries is the next one up, and that's the one that is we're not sure on. So, please let us know if you want us to talk about it. We will absolutely do so. I've read it. I need to reread it. I no longer own my copies, but apparently it's available on Comixology, so I can get it pretty easily.
Yeah, there's a couple, because the only one that would be probably hard is Angel, probably hard to do, because I don't know if you already have that or not.
I did. I don't own it anymore. To make things a little bit clearer as to why I keep saying I've used to have comics, I used to own a used bookstore, and when I first put the bookstore together, anything that wasn't near and dear to my heart, I used to seed the store, including some stuff that was it was valuable at the time and is incredibly much more valuable now, including I did have a copy of the Angela graphic novel that I used to try to get my bookstore off the ground. The Violator, I think I actually got rid of at a little bit later time, not involved with the bookstore, but I do remember very specifically thinking that Angela made a pretty good a pretty good seed for my store. Unfortunately, that folded a few years ago. The less said about that, the better. But so I used to own a lot more comics than I do, and I own a shit ton of comics.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was talking to Daniel, who, for those who don't know, we have a podcast on network called New Weird. He's on. He was just on a recent episode of all of us together, a round table about all the crazy comic stuff going on. But I was talking about my comic stuff, and I was like, I'm trying to consolidate and try to, like, not squish, but try to make sure all my short boxes are full, because there's a few I know that aren't, and I mean, I don't have a ton, but have like around 18 or 20 of them. He's like, oh my god, there's so many. I was like, wait till you see Derek and Lance's collection, because that's nothing.
I will send pictures. If, I might end up posting some pictures on the Blah Blah Instagram if you guys are really curious. So hit me up. I'm genuinely willing to talk about it. Much more willing, apparently, than either one of us are willing to talk about these next two issues, because okay. Before we get into the actual issues, we have to address these are the infamous late issues.
Yeah.
Spawn shipped issue 18 and then skipped forward to issue number 21. Issues 21 through 25 all came out before issues 19 and 20. Apparently 19 came out between 23 and 24, and 20 came out between 23 and 25. Colby and I did some pretty vigorous research trying to figure out what the story is, and nobody's really got a clear reasoning or statement as to why these issues did not come out on time. Todd McFarlane in the actual published issue 20 makes a joke that it's because he can't count, which then became a long, embarrassingly long Wizard magazine joke. But otherwise, basically all the research that we could discover was there was a shipping error. There was just a shipping problem, and these two issues just missed a deadline and got shipped much later. They're also not McFarlane issues. I did not realize this, Colby, until you pointed it out. But Tom Ozakowski was the writer with Greg Capullo penciling. And, man, I hate these issues.
I'll say it's cool because you can tell Capullo is getting more and more comfortable with Spawn, and there's some really interesting and cool art in here, but I don't know anything else this writer has done.
I believe he was I think he's a Marvel writer. He's either Marvel. I recognize the name. He's a perfectly cromulent, generic superhero writer from the 1990s, and his Spawn is terrible. I didn't dislike them as much this time around as I did the first time I read them. The first time I read them, I thought they were absolute garbage. But there's a thing, he's trying to introduce another level of magic to the Spawnverse. He doesn't want just heaven or hell. He also wants this other dimensional magic area that also demons hang out in for some reason.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's so many ideas here that he had his own series, maybe, like the idea of the Elsewhere.
Or even a miniseries, like a Houdini miniseries, because also Harry Houdini fucking shows up for no reason. Like, he's not a bad character, and it's not a bad idea to put him there, but there's no explanation as to why it's Houdini.
Yeah, this is the sad thing. Had this been Neil Gaiman or Alan Moore or Grant Morrison, and they were playing with the Elsewin and the Elsewhere and this third branch of people dealing with stuff, it probably could have been awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of idea-age here. Like, the thoughts are good. I will go so far as to say the plot is serviceable. I do think playing with an atom bomb, the way that the writer chooses to play with an atom bomb, is a little both obvious and old-fashioned.
We also just got some stuff with the big bomb tearing up Entrance to Hell a couple issues ago.
Right, and not just that, but you have literally Spawn screaming actual lines like, it's the commies have the bomb. And that is the most 1980s fucking dialogue in a 1990s comic.
Yeah, I would say
it's kind of a joke.
Yeah, there's a lot here, like, the characters are not, like, their voices are just off. The last page of this issue with Terry talking just doesn't feel like Terry at all. If you ever see how good McFarlane actually is at creating a character, compare Terry from issue 3 or 4 to what happens in this issue, because he sounds like a completely different character. He reads like a different character. The art is amazing, but everything else is completely off.
And I will say, Houdini taking a couple of pages to kind of do the Cagliostro thing and be like, let's get you feeling your powers out here. You really need to understand how this works. That's actually a really cool scene.
Yeah.
And then at the top of issue 20, that's opening splash page of Spawn in a limo driver's outfit, ferrying Houdini around in the air, is a fucking incredible piece of art.
Yeah.
From Capullo. So
I was going to say, until the next issue where he's, like, only wearing that costume for some reason, but it's never established why he's wearing that.
Yeah, no, and I've already jumped to issue 20.
That's fine. I feel like DC doing kind of, I will say, because it's weird, a lot is presented, but not a lot happens. Basically, there's a bomb threat that he's trying to stop a bomb from blowing up, and these demons in the Elsewin want to see if that bomb will kill demons, so Spawn is there. And Houdini's kind of tricked in being there and tricked to bring him there, but he's double-crossed him, but then it's a triple-cross, and he gets out very easily, even though in the first part, like, there's no way he can get out. We made sure he can't do what he normally does, but then he does what he normally does.
And it's fine, yeah. It's a mess. I feel like, honestly, the less said about these two issues, the better, because I have nothing but vitriol.
Yeah, again, this is an interesting volume, because 15, 16, 17, 18 are all great. Especially 16, 17, 18 are incredible, but 15 being strong too. These last year are just like, and again, 19, I did not hate 19 by any means. I did not hate it. I think it's fine. A few things feel a little off, but whatever.
I liked it better on second read.
20, my only note I wrote for 20 was filler.
Oh yeah, utter filler, which makes it so weird that these were the issues that didn't come out on time because they read like filler.
I almost wonder partially if, because they were published in March, it didn't come out until October and November. I almost wonder if they didn't like the quality and were either McFarlane was deciding if he should put them out or not, and he put them out basically just for Capullo's art. I feel like that might be a case because
that actually makes a lot of sense. Also, I have to point something out that I didn't figure out again until this read-through. So, I've already talked a lot about how you can pretty much tell that Spawn Batman happens between issue 20 and 21 because 21 opens with Spawn's face getting sewn up with the shoelace.
Yeah.
But if you look at the last couple of pages of Spawn here, he's got a non-healing cut on his face that goes like the length of his face. So if you didn't consider Spawn Batman in continuity, this could be the reason he's got the shoelace in his face.
So true. Yeah, there's a lot of issues. I don't know. Like I said, the whole thing for me, I don't mind Spawn and the weird drivers get up. What's Green Hornet's partner, Kato?
Kato, yeah.
Yeah, very Kato. But there's no reason for it, and there's no reason for he throws Spawn keys to drive Houdini's car to drive keys, and they can fly him. There's one good line I like about magic being magic's not real. Magic is just such a good lie you convince the universe to believe it.
Which is also something that came up in later years on Hellblazer, which was how John Constantine uses magic. He's a con man.
Yeah.
He's such a good con man, he can con the universe, and that's his magic. So that is a take on magic that I have always deeply appreciated as well.
I love that. I love how it's presented in this issue. But yes, and then you have the subplot about this teenager or like young adult, he's 22. He's 22, as I say it. But he's 20. But
he's drawn like a teenager.
Yeah, he's drawn like a teenager. And they keep on saying he's this horrible person because stuff he does, but outside of two things he does, he doesn't actually seem like that big of a jerk. It's just for some reason he wants to blow up bums at some point.
Yeah, and that's his thing, is that he wants to get rid of bums. First he threw paint on them, now he's trying to set them on fire. Then he's he happily works on the detonator for the Russian agent who is going to threaten this conference with an A-bomb. And it's so contrived, honestly, I think is what really bothers me.
Yeah, because it doesn't fit the tone of Spawn. Because Spawn, like you said, Spawn is can be a melodrama. Spawn can be a soap opera, but Spawn can be a
bonkers sci-fi action book with way too many cyborgs.
Yeah, all that is Spawn, but Spawn's not, really whatever this book is, like a kooky adventure story between Houdini and a demon. Which again, that doesn't sound like a horrible book either.
The execution is absolutely atrocious.
It's bad. Like, I don't know. It's not like, I guess between this, because I've been doing this and because I've been doing or recording the other show with Lance, Couch Comics, where if you're listening to this, also on Night Nerd Network, we'll talk about all of our shows. It's one where we talk about stuff, an issue 1 or a single issue every day, and it's not the worst comic I've read in the past couple weeks, but a lot of that's just because I enjoy Spawn, and that's a big part of it. Because man, it's weird too, because I feel like in issue 19 he writes Spawn decently, but then in issue 20. Spawn talks, it's worse than the Frank Miller thing. There's certain lines Spawn says, like, that's just not something Al Simmons or Spawn would say.
Not at all, and it's glaringly obvious that it's not. Yeah, as I mentioned, cutting to end credits here, but if 17 is my favorite issue of Spawn so far, issue 20 is absolutely the worst issue of Spawn I have read up to this point, and I will include Frank Miller's disastrous
At least
attempt.
it was fun.
It was, and it kind of, again, it expanded on the idea of cyborgs are just like a normal thing in this world, aren't they? Because even dumbass gang members have cyborg enforcers. Yeah. So at least that added to the world.
All this adds to is like the fact that like Spawn can basically materialize anything out of cytoplasm, but that was already kind of hinted at in here. How it's resisted makes no sense. For one, in the last issue, Spawn is trying to get in Houdini's car. And then, he has to materialize the car, he has to materialize keys, but then somehow Houdini makes it disappear, even though we know he can materialize both. But then on top of that, he can teleport. Why does he need a flying car?
Yeah.
And also, if he can materialize anything, he could make another one. What's the point? And you also have this weird cliffhanger of where it's not clear of like, is Houdini traveling through time and doing all this before he died? Or is he... Like, it's not ever made clear, really, because you have this ending that kind of goes back in time, but he's talking about stuff that happened in the Spawn time frame, but it's a bunch of stuff that's just not clear.
Yeah.
It's, like you said, it's not...
It's dumb as hell is what it is. Let's be totally honest.
Yeah, it's definitely, out of the first 20 issues, it's weird to say this, but because we've just came off again, Volume 2 and Volume 3. Volume 1 has a lot of setup and a lot of learning who the characters are. Volume 2 has some great issues. Volume 3, I feel like for the most part, has been extremely fun and for the most part extremely good. And then
it's damned by this.
This issue 20 is... Issue 19 is bearable. Issue 20 can go in the bin. Like, it is not... Yeah. I will say this. I did not know this until we were talking to you. You said, look at your singles. I own issue 19. I do not own issue 20. And...
What's funny is I think I do, but I couldn't bring myself to pull it out because I didn't want to touch it.
Well, it's funny because people who don't know, I'm slowly trying to get to own every issue of Spawn. Not like every variant and everything, just at least a copy of 1 through 300. And I have a decent amount, like, okay, I'm getting closer to having it all than not having it. And I'll have to get this, but this will be one of the issues I make sure to buy in a lot, because I don't want this by itself.
Right.
I don't mind paying $10 to $15 or more, or even more for a Spawn book, but this one's paying $1 for it if I don't have to. I feel like this is the first one where I feel like actively you could probably skip 19 and 20.
Yeah, like you said, it's utter filler and obviously didn't really contribute anything totally necessary because they went 5 months without them on the shelves in any way, shape, or form, and, the Spawn universe clearly did not stop turning.
No, we're about to, minor spoilers, we're about to get some of what I think is some of the best McFarlane stuff in the early Spawn, and for us to end this weird filler gap between Morrison and McFarlane coming back, but, getting a lot of Capullo, my only thankful thing is this, like, in a weird way, it gave Capullo more time to hone Spawn before McFarlane came back.
Right. Which is totally okay in my book, considering how much work Capullo does on the title in the future.
Yeah, like, he becomes integral to for the next, from issue 20 to 100, he does a cover for every issue, and it's only, there's very few where he doesn't do pencils or something for it. There's, the only one I can think off the top of my head, I know 77, he doesn't do interior art, but we talked off mic, has one of the coolest Spawn covers there are. So
of all time, he's probably my favorite Spawn cover.
Yeah,
honestly.
I have a figure of it. So it's this is not the on down. We'll focus on the good. All the Grant Morrison anti-Spawn stuff is great. The medieval Spawn stuff is cool. There's great McFarlane moments. There's great Capullo moments. There's great Morrison moments. It is,
but unfortunately, it's a mixed bag, and I hate to say that because otherwise, if it weren't for 19 and 20, we would be fucking effervescent over this.
Oh yeah, if it wasn't for 19 and 20, this would be like a perfect volume of Spawn.
Yeah,
it really would be, and it's in a way, it's probably maybe it's good that 15. Well, even then, no, because if this would have ended on 21, it would have ended on a better note. So.
Yeah.
It's just, I would say, 21 starts a part of like a 4-part story, but they don't care. That doesn't seem to stop them in the first 2 volumes from ending on one, so.
Well, actually, I read the back cover of Volume 3, and apparently they are absolutely committed that every Spawn Origins contains 6 issues. So, since they could not print issue 10 in the previous volume, they had to split the stories up like that, just like they had to split up the story between issues 6 and 7 from the Overkill stuff in volumes 1 and 2. So, at least this one did end on we didn't have the cliffhanger ending that we've had in the last 2 volumes. I can at least give it that.
True.
It had a terrible ending, but at least it had an ending.
True, and you know what? Yeah, it had an ending. I think that's all you can say about these. It's an ending.
It is definitely an ending. But speaking of new beginnings, Spawn Origins Collection Volume 4 collects issues 21 through 26. That is going to be our next respawn. We're still debating how we want to handle the Spawn Batman crossover. It's going to be a special episode.
Yeah.
It may be we are considering putting up a Patreon for a respawn. If we do, then it's going to be a Patreon-exclusive episode. If we choose not to do that at this time, then we'll release it separately as its own show for your listening pleasure. We're still in discussion on that, so we'll see. Let us know. I know things are really tough right now. I don't really want to get into why because, well, you kind of want these things to be timeless, but I can absolutely understand if supporting yet another set of creators on Patreon is just too much of a strain on your wallet right now. I totally get it. But let us know. Let us know if Patreon for exclusive episodes talking about the miniseries or animated series or Spawn the movie is something that you would be interested in. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/blah blah podcast, because that's still our main channel.
Yes.
You can find us on Twitter, where I am at blah blah pod.
I'm at Hellhound F5.
You can find us on Instagram, where I am at blah blah podcast.
I am also at Hellhound F5. And in fairness, I've basically just been posting Spawn stuff because I keep buying stuff on eBay as a certain virus takes over. So
it's true, you have. And like I say, I think I might go back and redo my tour of the nerdery on Instagram so that everybody can understand exactly what I'm talking about when I say I have a goddamn shit ton of comics.
Yeah.
But you know what? Thank you all so much for listening. I bought these Spawn Humble Bundles on a complete whim. Colby's the Spawn superfan here. I've read on and off. I'm a novice. I can't tell you how much joy I'm getting out of reading these and discussing them and looking critically at, a somewhat maligned but also very much celebrated series from the 1990s.
And one that I'm very happy, looking at articles while we're studying this, to find for some reason it's just slowly on the uprise again. So, and I'm not going to complain about that at all, but for some reason, all of us weird Spawn fans are continuously buying Spawn and haven't given up on it. And
it's doing that weird Walking Dead thing where after the anniversary issue of 300, sales have maintained. That's fucking weird the best way.
Yeah, the fact that from 250 and Resurrection, if the fact that from 2011 to now they've gone from, hey, we did 9,000 to 10,000 units printed, to now it's like, oh yeah, we're in the top 10 with 60 to 100,000. It's that's a rather, in the modern age, that's a very impressive jump. And even as someone who loves Spawn, even 300, I'm still to this day shocked 300 sold what it did, and for sure 301 and 02. I'm hey, again, whatever. I'm not going to complain. The more Spawn I get, the better. So I'll keep it up.
But thank you all for listening to this show, for putting up with us talking about it. I hope you're enjoying it. If you have any comments, criticisms, ideas for the show, we would love to listen and respond. Let us know. And as I said, we do blah blah podcast, blah blah, or blah blah comics, blah blah curse words. twice a month, where we try to talk about more recent stuff. That we should be having another Comics Collision coming up soonish.
I was about to say,
we're definitely prepping for that.
This is the time of year where it's like we normally are up to news, but here, spoiler, all the news, everything's canceled. That'll date this. That'll date this a little bit, but hey, it's the very end. So we're having a blast doing these. So I'm thankful for any of you guys out there who listen to them. I know our SoundCloud people on SoundCloud and iTunes have been listening. If you are listening there, please share it. If you're on iTunes, please review it. If you're on YouTube listening to it, leave a comment, share it. It helps a ton, and we are very appreciative because we love doing these, and I definitely want to keep going because the further away we get from like the basic Spawn that people know, it gets more and more interesting because already once we're into issue 20, once we get to these issues, we're already into that part where a lot of people don't know some of these stories.
Yeah, I feel like after around about issue 25, a lot of people dropped off, came back for issue 50, and hung out. At least that's my personal story.
No, a lot of people. I mean, you look at sales, that's true. Up until like around 50 it jumped, then around 100 it jumped, but a lot of stuff in between, it kind of was neither here nor there, and even then people normally bought it like, oh, I'm buying issue 50 because I want to buy 50, and that's it. So, again, thank you guys so much for joining us on this ride. Thank you for continuing to listen to it, and leave a comment, tell us what you thought of this volume, tell us what you're excited for in the next one, and we will see you next month with another episode of Respawn.
Bye, everybody.